Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of Binnall of America Audio Season 2. It is December 30th, 2006, and we are wrapping up the year and looking ahead to 2007 with James Carrion, the new International Director of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Major changing of the guard in the biggest UFO organization in the world. Of course, that's big news, so we set up an interview here with James Carrion. James and I are going to talk about his plans as the new leader of the organization. We're going to talk about how he ended up joining MUFON and rising through its ranks up to International Director. Big new initiatives coming from MUFON in regards to public relations, also drawing in younger members and trying to decipher what the UFO phenomenon is. James is going to detail these new initiatives coming from MUFON, what the organization's endgame plan is in event of UFO disclosure. He responds to the various criticisms and critics of MUFON. All the critiques you've heard of MUFON, we're going to throw them at James Carrion. He's going to respond to that. Plus, of course, tons and tons more. It's a pretty rare interview. We haven't heard much from James Carrion yet, despite his lofty new position. For those of you who are unfamiliar with James Carrion, let me give you a little bit of background on him. James began his lifelong interest in the UFO phenomenon at the age of 11, when he began his own UFO news clipping collection. As a young boy, James lived in Puerto Rico at a time when the island was a hotbed of UFO activity, and he later researched the Chupacabra and the Laguna Cartagena sightings. James served for 4 years as a U.S. Army Russian linguist in the Military Intelligence Corps, and became fascinated with the story of the Gulf Breeze 6, a group of young military intelligence soldiers that went AWOL from their base in Augsburg, Germany, to search for UFOs in Gulf Breeze. Upon moving to Colorado in 1996, James joined the Mutual UFO Network and worked as the state section director for both northeastern and northwestern Colorado. James proposed and implemented MUFON's Pandora project, an electronic archiving of all MUFON's UFO case files, and served on the MUFON International Business Board for 3 years, before being elected as the MUFON International Director in 2006. James holds a Bachelor of Arts in Russian Language and a Master of Arts in International Affairs, both from Florida State University. He is also the CEO of a national computer training company and is widely recognized as a computer expert. James currently lives in Bellevue, Colorado with his wife Lisa and son Aiden. And you can find out more information on MUFON and James Carrion at www.mufon.com. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview was recorded on November 8th, 2006. James Carrion on Binnall of America Audio, Season 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Binnall of America Audio. I want to welcome as my guest James Carrion. He is the new International Director of MUFON. He's taking over the job from John Schuessler. I thought this was really big news, and I wanted to get James Carrion on the show to talk about this changing of the guard at MUFON and MUFON in general. So, James Carrion, welcome to the show, and congratulations on your new post.
Thanks, Tim.
Let's start out with just your bio, your background. Who's James Carrion? A lot of people probably haven't heard of you yet. Talk about your background, where you came from, and how you found an interest in the UFO phenomenon.
Sure. Well, I'll start off with my interest in UFOs. I've had an interest in the subject pretty much all my life. It actually started when I was about 11 years old, living up in northern Illinois. My mom actually subscribed to all the major tabloid publications like the National Enquirer and the Star and so on. And I took an early interest in news clipping all of the UFO and alien-related stories. I don't know why, but they fascinated me, so I started off my little collection there.
Yeah.
When I was about 11 and a half, we moved to Puerto Rico, where I lived for 7 years until I graduated from high school. And I don't know if a lot of the viewers know this, but Puerto Rico is one of the hotbeds of UFO activity, and it has been for a number of years. So I became very interested in the subject also while living down there. There was a local group of UFO investigators in the town where I lived, and one of the things they did was not only actively investigate sightings, but they would also take little excursions into the tropical rainforests, one of the national parks there, and they were actually trying to make contact with aliens. My dad did not let me accompany them because he's a very religious person. He thought that UFOs were something of a spiritual and demonic nature. according to the group members, they did have personal contact with alien beings there. Well, I personally did not have that experience. When I left Puerto Rico, was to join the military. I was joined the Army as a security intelligence analyst. I went to Russian language school there, and in the military became a Russian linguist, Spanish linguist. Did some work for the National Security Agency. Had a top secret clearance. Did that for about 4 years active and 2 years reserve. Then left the military and went to school at Florida State University. At Florida State is where I really first learned about MUFON as an organization, and was in relation to an interesting UFO-related event where there was a group of 6 U.S. soldiers that went AWOL from their post in Germany to Gulf Breeze, where there was a flap of UFO activity going on, and they were, I don't know why, were looking for UFO-related events, and they actually one of them actually attended the MUFON symposium that was going on in Pensacola.
Wow.
So that's when I first heard about it. And so when I moved to Colorado soon after that, I decided I was going to actually seek out the organization and join it. And that's what I did. This was back in 1996. I went with some MUFON members down to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. I became a field investigator for MUFON, and then a state section director. And when the MUFON headquarters moved to Colorado and John Schuessler took over, I did volunteer work there for John. And at that time is when I really took a good look at what MUFON had accumulated over the last 38 years in terms of their investigative files. And I thought, we really need to get these files in electronic form for researchers to be able to access. So I proposed to the MUFON board what's called the Pandora Project, which was to take all of our paper files and get them electronically scanned. They accepted the proposal. They put me in charge of it. And 3 years after I proposed it, we finalized the scanning of all those files, some 13,500 cases.
Wow.
They also invited me to join the MUFON board. This was back in 2003. I actively served on the board for 3 years. And then when John announced that he wanted to retire, he solicited board members to put in their proposal for taking over the organization. I did, and I was voted as the international director.
Wow, awesome. That's quite a bio sketch there. That was great. Thanks. Let's talk a little bit about MUFON, the organization, first, and then we'll get into your new job as the international director. Talk a little bit about what MUFON is, the history of MUFON, that kind of thing. So for those who are left out in the cold, we can bring them in.
Sure, no problem. The organization actually was founded by John Schuessler and Walt Andrus back in 1969. This was right after Project Blue Book was terminated. For those folks who are listening who don't know the history of Blue Book, it was the Air Force investigation that went on for 20 years into what UFOs were. Mm-hmm. And the way that Blue Book actually was terminated was because the University of Colorado did a scientific study, or what they called a scientific study, of UFOs, and they concluded that there was nothing to the phenomena. Even though if you read their report, it's the complete opposite. There were a number of reports that they simply could not identify, or sightings that they could not identify. Some very significant radar visual cases, UFO photographs, and so on.
Yeah.
But the Air Force sort of took the conclusions from that study and decided to wash their hands of the whole subject and terminated Blue Book in 1968. Civilian organizations, in the meantime, were springing up, and Walt Andrus was actually a member of APRO, mm-hmm. the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. He had sort of a falling out with the founders of APRO, Jim and Coral Lorenzen. He decided to go off and form MUFON, and that's where actually the first MUFON meeting took place in John Schuessler's backyard in 1969. Huh. So they actually attracted quite a few of the other organizations that were active at the time, their members, to also join MUFON, NICAP members, and APRO.
Yeah.
And they basically set it up as a grassroots organization where each state would have its own chapter, foreign countries could have their own chapters, and the leadership would be decentralized, which I think a lot of folks really liked. And it sort of sprang up from there. It started off as an investigative organization to actively investigate sightings, and that's hence why we have all these investigative case files. But back, again, about 3 years ago when I was on the board, we decided to change our mission statement and change our goals. And we've added 2 additional goals, which are to research UFOs and also to educate the public on UFOs. We've been a great investigative organization. Now it's time for us to take the information we've gleaned over the last 38 years and actually try to make some sense out of it, and also just educate the public in general that this is a serious subject. It's not a laughing matter, even though a lot of folks will chuckle when they hear that you're a UFO investigator. Of course, they'll also take you to the side and say, well, hey, I had this sighting, or I have a friend who had a sighting. A lot of folks don't know that back during the 1940s when folks were first starting to see these craft nationwide, everybody took it very seriously. The U.S. government took it extremely seriously. They didn't know whether it was craft from outer space or from a foreign country. So it was a serious matter back then, and we want to make sure it's a serious matter now. It's not a laughing matter.
Yeah. Does MUFON have an official stance on just what UFOs are? Because I was a little confused, because I saw Walt Andrus at the X Conference 2005, and fantastic presentation. I can't put that one over enough. And he said that MUFON does not make any claim about the origins and the makeup of UFOs. And then at MUFON.com, there's sort of like a what we know based on our research type page, and it says that UFOs are real, the universe is teeming with life, and that UFOs deserve scientific study. Obviously, I agree with all that. But so does MUFON have an overall umbrella sort of stance on what UFOs are, or are they sort of just like, let's just look at what UFOs are?
Well, I think that's a real good question, Tim. And actually, one of the questions I posed to the board when I first joined, which was, what is our stance on what UFOs are, and what do we really believe? I got varied responses from the board members, and I think it's just because this phenomena is so complex, so varied. There's such a wide spectrum of activity. It's really hard for anybody, and it doesn't matter whether you're a top ufologist and you've been in the field for 30 plus years. The bottom line is you can't really just make a blanket statement on what a UFO is.
Yeah.
We have UFOs that look to be physical craft, whether they're of earthly origin or of extraterrestrial origin, we don't know. We don't even know if they're interdimensional, if there is such a thing. We also have this whole spectrum of activity related to cattle mutilations and crop circles and the alien abduction phenomena. A lot of the stuff borders not only on the physical but also on the paranormal. So it's really difficult to come up with a blanket statement and say this is what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do, though, as an international director, I do want MUFON to make a series of statements in terms of what are the probabilities of these different hypotheses that have been proposed. In fact, one of the things we're going to be doing that we've never done before is in March of 2007, we are going to have a workshop where we're going to invite some of the top ufologists, and we're going to explore each of the major hypotheses in turn on an annual basis. So this year, actually say 2007, our first workshop will be on the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which was the original theory that was proposed on the origin of the craft. We're then going to take what we gleaned from that workshop and make a probability statement at our symposium in August. We're going to do that in turn each year for the major hypotheses that have been proposed. And that way we can cover all aspects of the phenomena without having to make just this general blank statement that wouldn't do service to what the phenomena really encompasses.
Wow, that's exciting. That's really exciting. Now, is this workshop open to the public type situation, or is this going to be a closed-door retreat type thing?
Right. It's going to be a retreat, 3 to 4 days. It's going to be by invitation only. So it's not open to the public, but of course our symposium is open to the public, where the findings will be announced.
Oh, okay, so then all right, then you guys are going to sit on that, and then the findings will come out in the summer when
That's
the
correct.
symposium. Okay. Now, over the years, I'm sure there's been sort of ebbs and flows for the membership of MUFON, especially when you look at the mainstream popularity of UFOs. Where would you say right now how the membership is looking? Sum up sort of like the numbers situation as far as membership goes.
Sure. Well, MUFON is actually in very good standing right now, both financially and from a membership perspective. We are gaining new members at a faster rate than we've seen for a number of years. But let me talk a little bit about that in terms of membership. we find that the interest in UFOs among the general population is just incredibly high. I mean, all you have to do is turn on the TV and tune into any of the major cable channels, and you'll see that there's just UFO-themed show after UFO show. And so we know that the folks out there in the general public are very keen on reading about it and understanding it. Now, of course, a lot of those folks may be looking for some sort of instant gratification in terms of, well, I just want to read about what the latest sightings were and maybe a couple of tidbits of information about the phenomena. And so they'll find what they need pretty much readily on the internet. They don't really need to go out and seek a UFO organization like it was in the old days where, because there was this sort of vacuum of information, we were the folks that folks would turn to. So we don't expect the general population to just turn around and join MUFON en masse. Who we expect to join MUFON are the folks that are not just curiosity seekers, and they're not just satisfied with just instant information. They really want to do something about it. They've either had an experience themselves, or they know folks who've had experiences. They want to really get to the bottom of the matter, so they want to be the investigators and be the ones who take an active role in this. Those are the folks that typically join the organization. We know that we haven't yet tapped into that completely into that entire market. We know there are a lot of folks out there that would join us if they just knew more about the organization, or even that we existed. So if we have anything right now, it's more of a public relations issue, and we're hoping to address that within the next year to 2 years.
All right, and now you may not know this offhand, but what would you say the average age of a MUFON member is? Because one of the big parts of our show here is that we try to appeal to young people, and we want to get more young people involved in the esoteric in general. So what I'm interested in is the average age of a MUFON member, and are you seeing any sort of any motion anywhere as far as young people joining up with MUFON?
We are. I would say that the average age, and I'm just guessing here, is probably anywhere between 40 and 50 years old. Mm-hmm. So we do have a number of folks in the organization that are more middle-aged, but we do have as one of our goals to actively seek out younger members. We have a number of initiatives underway to actually do that. One of the things, actually, real interesting things that just came up recently is a major university, actually a very prestigious university, and I won't say who it is just yet because we haven't formalized our relationship. They're interested in forming up a MUFON chapter, sort of as a student club. Wow. And I think that's an excellent idea. We're going to support them as much as possible to make that happen, and then try to replicate that throughout the colleges and universities nationwide. We know that there are young people out there that would like to take an active role if they just had some way of doing it, and so we want to provide a vehicle for that. Yeah, that would be great. And now, sort of to close out the general MUFON type questions, can you talk a little bit about the international aspect of MUFON? I know you guys have a lot of branches in various countries. Talk a little bit about that. Sure. Well, we have what we call national directors as well as foreign representatives. The national directors are folks that are actually interested in forming up a chapter of MUFON in their country. So we have folks, for example, in Spain and a number of other foreign countries. But we also have what we call foreign representatives. There are UFO investigative organizations similar to MUFON in Mexico, in Italy, for example, in Russia. And rather than try to take what they already have as established membership and try to convert them over to MUFON members, we decided let's just go ahead and set up a liaison, a relationship with them, since they have the same goals that we do.
Nice. Okay, now let's move on to you really in this new international directorship position. What are the general duties of the international MUFON director, for starters?
Sure. Well, general duties are basically to represent MUFON in various aspects publicly. I'm the face of MUFON, so if it requires a major interview on TV or radio, I'm the person they should be contacting. But in terms of just day-to-day duties, we have a membership we have to take care of in terms of making sure we process all the membership paperwork. We have a monthly journal that goes out to all our members. We have to put that on a monthly basis. There's just an incredible number of emails that I answer on a daily basis from folks that are interested in the field, both from members and non-members. And then there's just the active investigations that we have going on. And sometimes it takes up an enormous amount of my time just to try to actively be involved in the investigative side of things. I'm not sure if your listeners knew that there was a company that claimed to have found a U.S. Air Force jet that crashed into Lake Superior in 1959, and then supposedly they also found an object nearby. It's one of the major classic UFO cases. Yeah. We actively investigated those claims, and we think that they're bogus. But that took an enormous amount of my own personal time to track down leads, to talk to different folks in the U.S. government and Canadian government and so on. So, it's not just putting a public face on the position, it's also making sure that we keep our investigative apparatus completely functional.
Yeah. And how long do you have the job for? Is this like a year-to-year thing, and then it gets renewed, or is it?
It's a 3-year position.
Okay.
Now I can tell you that there's only been 2 other directors, actually 3 other directors before me. The first director stayed on just for a year. That's when the organization was first founded. Walt Andrus took it on for 20 years. Yeah. And then John Schuessler had the helm for 6 years, and so who knows where it's going to go from here? But my term is for 3 years.
Nice. Now, you said you joined the board of directors, and then when John stepped down, he solicited people from the board of directors to take over the helm. What's this story with the board of directors? Are they sort of like the Congress to the MUFON or something like that?
Well, they're actually our business board. Any major nonprofit organization should have a board that operates in terms of making sure that the organization is viable from a business perspective. So the folks that are currently on the board are not only ufologists, but they also have business backgrounds and financial backgrounds. So they're making sure that MUFON as a nonprofit is financially viable. Okay.
Now, you're about to take over this big position, and you're already talking about things that sound interesting, like the workshop thing and this college MUFON idea. Is there any particular direction you'd like to take MUFON during your tenure?
Sure. Sure. I mean, one thing I'd like to take MUFON to is a resolution of this mystery. I mean, I mean, it's been around with us for a number of years. I'd like to solve it within my lifetime. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm really pushing. I mean, there are a lot of books that have been written about UFOs. There's a lot of folks out there that you can go to workshops and view their talks and so on. Yeah. I tend to believe that where the truth is at and where we're going to find resolution is in the raw data itself. So that's why I pushed the Pandora project, which was to get our data in an electronic format that we can easily search. And then our next step from here is we're actually going to be forming research teams to take a hard look at that data and start answering some of these major questions. So that's really my push and what I'd like for my tenure to be, which is to let's actually take what we've gleaned all these number of years, and let's go ahead and analyze and present our findings and come to some conclusions about what the phenomena is about.
And you sort of alluded to that there is a PR sort of issue with MUFON, and that you want to get the word out more, and that there were some ideas brewing about that. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what we might be seeing as far as a higher public image for MUFON?
Sure. Well, we have a real good source in Hollywood who's been helping us out in terms of plugging MUFON in various UFO documentaries. And we're hoping to continue that. There was actually talk of a UFO-themed reality TV show where MUFON would be highlighted, kind of like what the Sci-Fi Channel does with the Ghost Hunters. That's part of it. I mean, obviously, we get a number of members once people start finding out about MUFON on these various TV shows. Yeah. The other side of it, though, which is what I'm very interested in, is just making sure that MUFON's a household name in terms of UFO investigations. And one way we plan on doing that, one of our initiatives that you'll be seeing actually this coming year is what we call our First Responder Education Program. We're going to put together packets of information for folks that are in first responder positions like police officers and firefighters and emergency management officials a packet of information that says, okay, folks, if somebody witnesses a UFO and they don't know about any UFO organizations, they're going to be contacting you. And we want you to contact us. We want you to know that we're here, that we're a resource, that we take this seriously, that it's not a laughing matter. And to show you that it's not a laughing matter, we would like for you to look at the history of first responders and UFO sightings. We have an enormous amount of information in our database that where the witnesses, the primary witnesses to UFO events were public safety officials and police officers and so on. We want them to look at it and say, okay, if folks, my peers in my field are seeing this, this can't just be nonsense. There has to be something to it.
That sounds exciting. That sounds like it would help out a lot too. Now, you said you're going to be like the public face of MUFON, and I was remembering that John Schuessler, I believe, was on Larry King a couple of years ago. Do you expect to be making national media type appearances? You're going to be the one I'll expect to see you then as in the Schuessler role on Larry King?
Sure, that's definitely a possibility. Although we also are going to be setting up, we actually have one, but we're going to actually be getting it completely manned now, what's called our Speakers Bureau. We have a number of folks in the organization that are very outspoken, very well-spoken, who have a lot of experience in the field and actually a lot of experience with doing interviews and doing talks and so on.
Yeah.
Stanton Friedman, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to actively employ these folks to start doing more interviews on a nationwide basis, and we want to get them out there and start talking to people on MUFON's behalf.
Nice. And are you ready to handle the crazy skeptics that'll probably throw at you when you show up on these shows?
Sure. It's unfortunate when in what they call unbiased reporting, and they have to put the opposing viewpoint, but then they don't put the person in there that has done any sort of investigation themselves.
Yeah.
So they're the debunkers that go on there. They have what sound like good arguments, counter arguments, but they have no data to base it on. So it's very frustrating for us, but we do have some speaking points to that.
Nice. And I'm very surprised that you were behind this Project Pandora, because I have this in the notes here. I remember that Walt had talked about it at the X conference, and I was going to ask the progress of it. So it sounds like Project Pandora is all wrapped up, huh?
Right. We have 90. I would say 98% of our files are now in electronic format. We do have some special collections that we still need to scan as funds become available. But the vast bulk of our investigative case files are ready for research.
Awesome. Now, one of the things that I have talked about a lot with some of the guests on the show, and this is probably like a perfect subject maybe for you, is the infamous missing APRO documents. Do you expect any motion in any chance of acquiring the APRO documents? I know they're someone's got them and they don't want to give them up.
Yes, that's a pretty sad situation, actually. In fact, I spoke with a couple of our coalition members. There's something out there called the UFO Research Coalition, which involves MUFON, the Center for UFO Studies up in Chicago, and then the Fund for UFO Research. Our three organizations actively collaborate. The Center for UFO Studies actually inherited all the old NICAP files.
Yeah.
So those are in a good place, very well protected, and we're actually hoping to add those to our Pandora project to expand the number of cases we can research. The APRO files, though, are, we should say, probably lost at this time. We don't know where they're physically at. We don't know really who has them. It was very unfortunate that happened. But we also found out recently that there has been some microfilm copies of some of the APRO files. And I spoke with a couple of folks who physically have those, and we're going to get those scanned and added to our Pandora database. So even though all the APRO files are not available, there are select ones we still have access to.
Okay, nice.